It's another great day at the Supreme Court for Donald Trump and for our Constitution. And for this upcoming November election, we're going to get all the details as Donald Trump wins against the Justice Department of Joe Biden. We're going to give you those details, plus the latest fallout from the disaster debate performance last week and the obvious disintegration of Joe Biden's mental capacities as president of the United States. Are they going to stick with him? Are they going to chuck him out? We'll tell you what we think. Also, Mika with an epic 15-minute meltdown this morning, but she's still there. She's like the Japanese soldiers that emerged from the caves 10 years after World War II, still ready to fight. Mika will be the last woman standing on behalf of Joe Biden. You'll see all the glorious tears coming up in just a moment. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. And we're back live in our D.C. headquarters studios, and it's good to be back here after our 2-week jaunt into the Midwest. But, of course, we didn't go anywhere. We've been here with you this entire time. Thank you for your loyalty. Thank you for watching our show. If you're live right now with us on Rumble, you can join the chat team there as we're taking your comments and even putting some of them up on the screen if it's relevant and witty and pithy and, well, irreverent. Plus, if you're watching on X or Facebook, thank you. Like and subscribe, please follow and be a part of what we do every single day here. And if you're watching after the fact, we really appreciate it. We don't ask much of you other than your loyalty, your good cheer, and the like and subscribe. That goes a long way. Early this morning, the Supreme Court at 10:25 in the morning issued the most anticipated decision of this entire session, whether a president of the United States has full or even partial immunity from his acts in office. Now, this is something that the Supreme Court really hasn't had to chime in on with regard to criminal charges for our entire history, because no president in our history has ever had the temerity to bring criminal charges up against his predecessor. It took Joe Biden. It took the bitter, despicable, angry Joe Biden and his enablers in the Democratic Party to even bring this issue up, because he was so fearful of Donald Trump. He was so bitter and angry at Donald Trump and you, the voters who supported Donald Trump, that he decided to put the full weight of the federal government judicial system against Donald Trump, to throw him in jail, to tie him up in court, to paint him as a criminal so that he could win, so Joe Biden could win the election this November. And this morning, it all flew back in Joe Biden's face. Here's a look as the opinion came down. Under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. We'll get into the details of that in just a moment and what that really means and how it may be interpreted and applied specifically to Donald Trump and to other presidents, past, present, and future, in just a moment. But this 6-3 decision, for the most part, halts the criminal prosecution of Donald Trump with regard to anything associated with January 6th and the 2020 campaign. It also probably puts a halt to the investigation into his classified document case, which was already sort of suspended, and it probably stops Fani Willis's case down in Atlanta, although that one has also pretty much been suspended as well. Here's how the team at Fox News and Jonathan Turley in particular reacted.
Of the justices in politics. Let me go to you, Jonathan Turley, for a reaction to this decision so far.
Well, this is along the lines of what many of us anticipated, that the court did not go with absolute immunity on everything, but did say that there's absolute immunity when it comes to core constitutional powers. We're still going through the opinion to see if there's any assistance on where that line is to be drawn. This case is going to have to go back to the district court, which is going to have to try to sort of thread this needle to determine what in the case would not fall under these protections. But this is obviously a win for President Trump, in the sense that the special counsel was arguing, as with the lower court, that there was very little immunity here to be concerned with. The counsel for the government was assuring the court that they really didn't have much to be concerned with here in terms of any changes in the status of the case. That's clearly not what won the day. The court here is saying that we do need lines here drawn to protect presidents so they have some breathing room. And you have to sort of wonder how the context affected the justices. I mean, if they want to look at the implications of leaving presidents without protection, they just need to look around the country. Even though Manhattan was not a federal case, it was a political prosecution in the view of many of us that was rather raw and open. And so this is a context that must have concentrated the minds of these justices as they did what Justice Gorsuch said and tried to write for the ages, to have something not for this case, but for future cases and future presidents.
Trey Gowdy, how does this, do we think, as we're still going through this, impact Jack Smith's case?
All right. Well, the impact on Jack Smith's case is they have to go back to the lower court now, and charge by charge by charge, Jack Smith has to explain how his charges against Donald Trump for his actions on January 6th do not fall under official acts of his presidency. Now, we'll dive deeper into that coming up in just a sec, because it's important for you to have facts so that you can apply this specifically to this situation, and also the wider reaching aspects of this. Because here's the thing, you're going to see from Democrats and the left all today, oh, this is a delay tactic. This is a delay tactic. They're just trying to push this off until after the election. No, these are important constitutional issues that are being decided here. You don't play fast and loose with the Constitution. You don't play fast and loose with criminal justice in this country just so you can punish your political opponent because you don't like him, without having it actually be determined by higher courts and the Supreme Court ultimately, as it did today, as to whether you are acting recklessly and putting our Constitution through the shredder. Let's be clear here. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, Merrick Garland, the attorney general, and Joe Biden, the man that both of them work for, just got spanked across the butt with a leather belt by the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision. And the Supreme Court said today that what you were trying to do to Donald Trump is a violation of the separation of powers in our Constitution. Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Jack Smith have been twisting, shredding, and using the Constitution as toilet paper for their own political ambitions to harm Donald Trump and to keep you from being able to vote for Donald Trump. That's what the Supreme Court said today. Who's angry today at this? The Biden people, Democrats. Alina Habba, the lawyer for President Trump, chimed in as well on Fox News.
Of course, it is a good day when the Supreme Court recognizes constitutional rights of presidents and the executive branch, but we should never have been in this situation to start with. This is a disgrace to America. So yes, the lower courts, again, will have to hear it. It will, in my opinion, slow down Jack Smith's persecution and selective prosecution of President Trump. And I don't see how this case could go forward before the election. But again, I would say that there's still issues to be discussed, such as how Jack Smith even got into this position, how we allowed our democracy, how we allowed the republic to become one that targets political opponents. The fact that we've been in front of the Supreme Court so many times is frankly a sad day for the American people. It's election interference at its finest. But I'm happy today. I think that Chief Justice Roberts made a good decision for what I'm seeing of. Obviously, I need to read it fully, but recognizing Nixon v. Fitzgerald, upholding that decision and stating that absolute immunity does exist for presidents is a good thing. It's an important thing for all Americans, both Democrat and Republican.
That's right. And to answer the question, we have to find out how Jack Smith got here. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor who was charged with going after Joe Biden's political opponent. And also, by the way, let's not leave Merrick Garland out of this. And it's like, oh, Merrick Garland, he's just, doing his job as the attorney general. He's calling balls and strikes. No. If there's one person in America other than Hillary Clinton that has a grudge against Donald Trump, it's Merrick Garland. Let's not forget, if Donald Trump had not won the election in 2016, Merrick Garland would be on the Supreme Court right now. Merrick Garland actually has a personal agenda against Donald Trump, or at least the appearance of a personal vendetta against Donald Trump. He should recuse himself from anything that involves the former president. But I'll answer your question about how Jack Smith got here. How did Jack Smith get here? Bringing up these bogus charges to be used as a weapon against a political opponent? Well, the last time anybody heard the name Jack Smith, for those of you who don't know this or don't remember, it had to do with the former governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell. Who was Bob McDonnell? Bob McDonnell won the governorship of Virginia in 2009. It was the election immediately after Barack Obama became president. And all through the next several years, Bob McDonnell was an incredibly effective and popular governor in Virginia. And people were whispering that Bob McDonnell would make a great Republican nominee for president to run against Barack Obama in 2012. And then all of a sudden, the Justice Department brought up charges against Bob McDonnell. I know, what a coincidence. And Jack Smith was the U.S. attorney who prosecuted Bob McDonnell. Well, of course, Bob McDonnell's political career was destroyed. There's no way the Republicans will nominate Bob McDonnell to run against Barack Obama now because he's facing criminal corruption charges from the federal government, from the Justice Department, from the U.S. attorney, Jack Smith. So Bob McDonnell is no longer a threat to Barack Obama. Bob McDonnell is prosecuted, and he leaves office in shame, in a cloud of shame. Oh, one other thing. Bob McDonnell then appealed those charges, appealed that conviction. It made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And years later, after Barack Obama won re-election and Bob McDonnell, who was seen as a major threat to Barack Obama winning re-election, should he have been the Republican nominee as governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell's career was over. Years later, the Supreme Court overturned that conviction, 8-1. Jack Smith, the same guy who brought those charges against a Republican opponent of Barack Obama, he's now the guy bringing charges against the Republican opponent of Barack Obama's third term, Joe Biden. That's how Jack Smith got here. Dana Perino reflected not just on this decision, but on a whole host of decisions that Donald Trump and Republicans and conservatives have benefited from in the waning days of this Supreme Court session.
This has been an incredible week for former President Trump.
Yeah.
If you think about last week, some of the rulings, especially the Chevron deference one, and I'm not saying that was just specifically for Trump, but if you're looking at what are the consequences and benefits of having a conservative court, if you're Republicans, that Chevron deference case was a big one in terms of regulations. You had the debate, which obviously went in his favor. And now you have the January 6th case from last week. Mm-hmm. And now this, I imagine that the Democrats are like, this is not how they saw all of this playing out.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Let's get into some details here, not just how it pertains. Well, first, let's talk about how it pertains to Donald Trump. And then we'll get into the larger picture about why this argument is so important, not just for Donald Trump and for this election cycle and Jack Smith's prosecution, but in a bigger picture, why you want a president, when acting officially, to have this kind of immunity. You don't want a president to have to make decisions as the head of the executive branch of our government, thinking, oh gosh, what happens if the next guy who comes into office will prosecute me? Okay, now you may not like that, but if you're not corrupt, this is actually a really important thing for a president to be able to have this. Julie Kelly, who covers this and many other things at the Supreme Court these days, specifically about what Jack Smith has done with January 6th and other judges have done with January 6th. She wrote about it. SCOTUS majority notes the chilling consequences of Jack Smith's J6 indictment against Donald Trump. Quoting now from the decision, criminally prosecuting a president for official conduct undoubtedly poses a far greater threat of intrusion in the authority and functions of the executive branch than simply seeking evidence in his possession, as in Burr and Nixon. The danger is akin to, indeed greater than, what led us to recognize absolute presidential immunity from civil damages liability. Let me pause there for a second. You're going to see a lot of legal pundits like Turley, like you just saw, Joe DeGenova, who I interview every week on my radio show. A lot of other people saying, yeah, we knew this was going to happen because the Supreme Court is on the record giving broad immunity to presidents for civil charges. And if you can't sue the president, you certainly shouldn't be able to put him in jail for his official acts as president. And of course, I keep saying that, official acts, because that's the key. What separates an official act from an unofficial act? And we'll get into those details. Just stick with us here. But let's get back to this. That the president would be chilled from taking the bold and unhesitating action required for an independent executive. Although the president might be exposed to fewer criminal prosecutions than the range of civil damages suits that might be brought by various plaintiffs, the threat of trial, judgment, and imprisonment is a far greater deterrent. Potential criminal liability and the peculiar public opprobrium that attaches to criminal proceedings are plainly more likely to distort presidential decision-making than the potential payment of civil damages. The hesitation to execute the duties of his office fearlessly and fairly that might result when a president is making decisions under a pall of potential prosecution, McDonald versus the United States, raises unique risks to the effective functioning of government. As Julie Kelly says, this refers to Jack Smith's prosecution that I was just telling you about of former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, which SCOTUS overturned 8-0. Oh, that's right. It was 8-0, not 8-1. Justice Scalia had passed away. That's right. A president inclined to take one course of action based on the public interest may instead opt for another, apprehensive that criminal penalties may befall him upon his departure from office. And if a former president's official acts are routinely subjected to scrutiny in criminal prosecutions, the independence of the executive branch may be significantly undermined. The framers' design of the presidency did not envision such counterproductive burdens on the vigor and energy of the executive. That's the Federalist number 70. Let me translate all of that for you. Anytime a district attorney or a attorney general of a state or the next president who assumes office, anytime they want to criminally punish someone who has just been president, they could bring criminal charges against them, as we're seeing right now. It's never happened in our history. And I know you might be thinking, well, no one's ever broken the law. Oh, really? Okay. You go with that. Any one of those people, a district attorney like Alvin Bragg, or an attorney general of a state like Letitia James, or an attorney general like Merrick Garland, or through a fig leaf proxy like Jack Smith, can bring criminal charges against a president to punish them politically, to retaliate against them, to bring some sort of, political vendetta or criminal vendetta against them because they don't like them or for whatever reason, unless that president has immunity for their official acts. And when we're talking official acts, you could talk about something that has to do with executing war or enforcing the law or anything like that. You can't have it because it then gives the power of a state attorney general over a presidency. And you may say, well, then they can get away with anything. No, the founders thought of this. That's why we have the impeachment article in the Constitution. If the president misbehaves, if the president breaks the law, if the president is guilty of high crimes or misdemeanors, then that's where Congress steps in. They have jurisdiction over this. They bring impeachment. In fact, they did bring articles of impeachment against Donald Trump for his actions on January 6th. And in fact, he was acquitted in the Senate. Now, you may not like that, but that's how it's done. It took Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Jack Smith to upend 240 years of constitutional norms to get us to this place. Oh, and one other thing. All these Democrats who are on television right now saying, oh, this is a delay tactic. They're just trying to push it past November. You're the guy who brought the charges during the election year. And by the way, you brought the charges during the election year because you wanted it to hurt Trump politically. There is nothing in the indictments against Donald Trump as it relates to January 6th that Merrick Garland, Joe Biden, the entire country didn't already know about on January 7th. But they didn't bring charges for 3 years. They waited until the election year. They waited until Donald Trump announced he was running for office. They waited until he was doing well in the polls. That's what drove this. So if you're upset that this now pushes it past election day, that's your fault. That's your problem. Donald Trump took to Truth Social, and his reaction was pretty clear. Big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American. Now, for those of you who are saying, well, wait a minute, when Donald Trump, as president, was contesting the results of the 2020 election, that was him acting personally as a U.S. citizen, as a candidate. He was just acting selfishly. He was just trying to protect himself. That's not an official act. Well, it is. And let me explain why. This is Donald Trump on January 6th. This is a big part of the case against Donald Trump, is the speech that he gave on the ellipse preceding the events at the Capitol. Here's a little bit of that speech.
People in a proper election. But you know, when you see this and when you see what's happening, number one, they all say, sir, we'll never let it happen again. I said, that's good. But what about 8 weeks ago? You know, they try and get you to go. They say, sir, in 4 years, you're guaranteed. I said, I'm not interested right now. Do me a favor. Go back 8 weeks. I want to go back 8 weeks. Let's go back 8 weeks. We want to go back and we want to get this right, because we're going to have somebody in there that should not be in there, and our country will be destroyed, and we're not going to stand for that.
Well, he was certainly prophetic about that last part. Our country is going to be destroyed because, you know, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? This is the president of the United States. At this moment, it happens to be Donald Trump, but that doesn't matter. He's the president of the United States. And what did he say in this speech? First of all, hey, do you notice that seal right there on the podium? What does that say? Oh, that's the official seal of the president of the United States, because he's the president. And his actions are related to his role as president. When he was sworn into, oh, what's that building behind him there? I'm trying to make it out. Can you tell what that building is? Oh, that's the White House. That's the official residence and office of the president. Looks pretty official to me, doesn't it? To you? When the president of the United States is sworn into office, he promises to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Take Donald Trump out of it for a minute. You're president of the United States, and you believe there's evidence to support the fact that the last election was corrupted, that we're about to count electoral votes from states that reached their conclusion on where their electoral votes should be distributed in a corrupt fashion, in an illegal fashion, against the laws of that state. And you know that Congress has the final say in this. The Congress does not have to accept the vote from the Electoral College if Congress also believes that there was a corrupt process. You turn to your legal advisors, and your legal advisors say, yes, Mr. President, we believe that there was a corrupt process and an unconstitutional process in Pennsylvania and in Georgia and in Wisconsin and in Michigan and in Arizona. Now, yes, certainly the election directly affects you, but set that aside for a minute. As president of the United States, if you truly believe that it was a corrupted process and it is about to be affirmed by Congress, and it's your constitutional duty to protect that process, then you're going to try to stop it. You're going to use whatever tools you have at your disposal to stop it. Legally. That's what he's doing. That's an official act. Now, let me be clear. You may think Trump is wrong. You may think that the 2020 election was pristine. You may think that every single thing that happened with mail-in ballots and drop-off boxes and covering up the windows when the counting of ballots was done and disregarding matching signatures and disregarding whether there was a proper date on the ballot, all things that happened. You may think that that's all fine and that there was no corruption and everything was pristine in the 2020 election. That doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is that Donald Trump, acting as president of the United States, believed and had supporting evidence and advice from his legal opinion, his legal advisors, for him to believe that, in fact, it was corrupted. And as the duly sworn officer to protect and defend the Constitution, as the head of the executive branch, it was his duty to carry out officially whatever intervention he could within the law. And that's exactly what he did. And that's why all of the events on January 6th that Donald Trump was engaged in trying to circumvent or block the acceptance of Pennsylvania and Georgia, and I believe Michigan and Wisconsin, that, of course, was an official act. You may think it was wrong. You may think that he was, off his rocker. You may think that he was deluded. Doesn't matter. All that matters now is whether it was an official or unofficial act. And by definition, the executive branch's oversight and participation in the acceptance of the Electoral College results is an official act of the office. He gets immunity. Now, if he sexually harassed one of his employees while he was president, I think you could argue that that's an unofficial act because the president of the United States isn't responsible for sexually harassing people. I just throw that out there as a example, hypothetically, not that we've ever had a president who would do such a thing. So now what's really telling about this decision today is how Democrats and people of the left have reacted to it. Because let's just say the veil has come off on how they truly think the presidency should be conducted and presidential powers should be utilized. Here's Aaron Rupar, a liberal journalist who aggregates videos and such on social media. He speculates, so if Joe Biden declared today that November's election is canceled and ordered the military to keep him in power, would that be an official act? Well, see, of course it wouldn't be, but it's good to know where Aaron Rupar's head is at, isn't it? Oh, and he's not alone. Dash Dabrowski, again, an influencer. I strongly encourage Joe Biden to take advantage of his absolute immunity, which has been lawfully granted by Trump's Supreme Court justices, to do whatever official acts he needs to do in order to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. You see, this is how they think. We're the authoritarians, everybody. And this is where their mind is at. Bradley Moss, the Supreme Court just gave Biden unequivocal immunity to order the military to take action against Donald Trump today, right now. Are you seeing who the fascists are? And then in full compliance with that, they have doctored this headline, of course. The actual headline from the New York Times was, to serve his country, President Biden should step down. But instead, they doctored it to say, should drone strike Donald Trump? Thank you for showing us who you really are. It's in these desperate times when they really show their true colors. And this guy, Harry Sisson, according to the Supreme Court, Biden should now send in SEAL Team 6 to take all of them out. He should send in the military to take out Trump. He has immunity for official acts now. Isn't Donald Trump protected by the Secret Service right now? I'm pretty sure he is, not just as a former president, but as a presidential candidate. I think Mr. Sisson should clear his schedule for an interview from federal authorities for such a thing, because I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to be ironic and sarcastic and demonstrate absurdity with absurdity, but it seems to me like that could easily be interpreted as an encouragement of violence against Donald Trump. Here's an interesting take on the decision, too. Today's big winner at SCOTUS, President Richard Nixon. He would have had presumptive immunity for everything for the cover-up to protect the presidency and the Brookings Fielding break-ins, national security. Nixon's had zero role in ordering the Watergate break-in itself. Do like Dick Nixon. But that's not true. You see, the Watergate break-in was specifically about his campaign, not an official act of the presidency, right? And so this is a skewed and completely misguided interpretation of what this decision made. It's all about official and unofficial. But I will tell you who the real winners are today, other than the Constitution and presidents in the future. And, well, these guys. These guys are big winners right now. In fact, I bet you in their heart of hearts, they were sweating this thing. Oh, sure, it may have stopped Trump or delayed Trump. But that guy on the far right-hand side of the screen, that's Bill Clinton. You may remember him. Oh, there's a whole lot of things that they could go after Bill Clinton. Remember how I mentioned sexual harassment in the office place and whether a president can be, you know, maybe a sexual assault even here and there? Yeah, he's good. That guy on the left, you may remember him. You recognize him. That's Barack Obama. In the final days of his presidency, he authorized the FBI under James Comey to go after General Mike Flynn and to continue an investigation into the next president and keep it secret from him. Now, you may think that that was a criminal act. In my heart of hearts, I do believe it was a criminal act. But Barack Obama can now say, listen, I had intelligence presented to me that the incoming president had been colluding with foreign adversaries. And as an official act of the presidency, it was my responsibility to ensure that it was investigated in case it was true. I don't like that. You probably don't like that either. But it was an official act. It was corrupt, but it was an official act. Those guys are the big winners. You talk about corrupt presidencies, and all they show you is a picture of Donald John Trump. Boy, he's an amateur. He's an amateur against those pros. In fact, one wonders what the Biden White House is cooking up right now. Because if you remember, it was the end of July of 2016 when the official FBI investigation into Donald Trump commenced. And that led to Russian collusion. It led to the dossier being released by Jake Tapper a week before inauguration. It led to the Robert Mueller investigation. And the timing is just about right now. The second it looks like Donald Trump could have a chance to win, well, it's happening right now as we speak. Take that to the bank. Hey, can your savings weather an economic storm? Think about what you've put away for the future. Inflation can render cash worthless. Real estate can crash just like it did in 2008. Economies built on a mountain of debt can fall like a house of cards. There are very few physical assets you can invest in that can stand the test of time. Gold has withstood as a valued form of money for millennia. It's why people are flocking to it now and why Birch Gold is busier than ever. Through a little-known tax loophole, Birch Gold lets you convert a retirement account into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. And the best part is it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Yeah, these are existing accounts that you've already got. You just convert them to gold with Birch Gold. To learn more, text Larry to 989898. Claim your free info kit on gold to give you all the details on this. Again, let me ask you, can your IRA or 401k weather an economic storm? If not, you got to call the people I trust. Birch Gold. Text Larry, L-A-R-R-Y, to 989898 and secure your savings today. Fallout continues from Joe Biden's disaster of a debate performance on Thursday night. And I want to preempt a lot of what we're about to see here because the Democrats' spin now is, well, everybody has a bad night. Hey, he's just a bad debater. You know, it was just a bad debate. Barack Obama, I've had some bad debates in my time. It's a bad debate. They're acting like the question here is, well, he lost a debate. No, this has nothing to do with him losing a debate. It's what we all saw. It's what we've seen for the last 4 or 5 years since he announced he was running for president, inexplicably against anybody's good judgment. This is about the gaslighting of the media against us now disappearing because they couldn't hide this for 90 minutes. This isn't about losing a debate. This is about every single American seeing with their own eyes just how mentally incapacitated Joe Biden is, not as a candidate, but as a president today, sitting in the Oval Office, making decisions that affect our lives. He can't do it. The man has mashed potato for brains. That's what this is about. But the spin is glorious.
Do we have new poll numbers for President Biden post-debate?
We do. You know, CBS News YouGov conducted some polling post-debate. We can compare it to the pre-debate numbers. And the bottom line, Alice, it's not any good. It's not any good. Look at this. Voters.
I got to pause here. The polls are in and it's not any good. Well, that's certainly an interpretation from one point of view, isn't it? Now, if you're a Republican and you want the Republican to win in November, these poll numbers are actually quite good. I do love it when CNN forgets to keep the mask on. So I just wanted to point that out to you. It's not very good. It's not very good. Now, he could have said, if you're Joe Biden, it's not very good. If you're a Democrat, it's not very good. But he didn't say that. But of course, he didn't need to say that because he is, in fact, a Democrat. So he was speaking from his own perspective.
And the bottom line, Al, it's not any good. It's not any good. Look at this. Voters who say that Biden has the mental health to be president. It was just 35% pre-debate. Look where it's dropped to now post-debate, 27%. How about that he should be running for president? It was 37% pre-debate. It's now 28%. I have never seen numbers this bad for an incumbent president during my lifetime. I mean, that mental health to be president, just 27%. You might say, okay, you know, that's low, but a lot of people thought Biden was too old back in 2020. These numbers look nothing like this back in 2020. These numbers were bad already. And the truth is, Allison, they have gotten just considerably worse, even in just a few days after that first presidential debate.
Yeah. How exactly does one win an election for president when 3 out of 4 Americans think you don't have the mental health to actually carry out the job? Oh, it's bad, all right. It's very bad. It's so bad, it's glorious. It's fantastic. Listen, I weep for our country, and I want this man removed from office as soon as possible. Oh, I know. That means Kamala Harris will be president. I know. But I'm sorry, I'm old-fashioned. I don't want a brain-damaged president. We have men and women, our sons and daughters wearing the uniform right now who can be put in harm, who have been put in harm's way, who have been killed by enemies of our country overseas in the service of their nation, and they were put there by orders of this commander-in-chief. If you were the child of someone who died wearing the uniform of the United States military while Joe Biden was president, would you in your heart of hearts at the very least know that your son or daughter went there following orders from a man who knew what he was doing, who was competent enough to send your child into harm's way? Think about that before you just look at this through the lens of politics. I know, trust me, I've already heard it from the Trump campaign people where they're like, yeah, we want to stick with Joe. Dad, he can't change. Let's just go with Joe. Joe is our best bet right now. And I understand they only have one thing that they're looking at right now, and that's election day in November. Even if she's Kamala Harris, I want to have a president who at the very least is not certifiably brain damaged, as we now have. All right. This is delightful and glorious and wonderful too. A debate watch party in Los Angeles on Thursday night happened to feature Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, Pritzker, that's the governor of Illinois, Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, and Bashir, that's CNN, Bashir. There were other high-profile attendees. By a few answers in, Rob Reiner was screaming about losing, and Jane Fonda had tears in her eyes, according to people in the room. How wonderful is that? It is a great time to be alive. Literal liberal tears from Jane Fonda that, you know, we could gather in a cup and put on the rocks and share amongst all of us. And then there's this from Tucker Carlson. Tucker has great sources, continues to have great sources. He's been a journalist in this town for 3 decades. Before we get to it, let's just be clear on what happened over the weekend. You had Barack Obama and Bill Clinton put out encouraging tweets saying, listen, everybody has a bad night. Everyone has a bad debate. There's no reason why Joe Biden should go anywhere. He's our candidate. You had Kamala Harris, of course, saying the same thing. You had Nancy Pelosi and you had James Clyburn. You had Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, saying the same thing. You had all of these statements on the record from high-profile Democrats saying, Joe's our guy. Joe's our guy. You also had this scene all of a sudden Saturday night where Joe and Jill and all the Bidens gathered at Camp David for a family meeting to discuss whether Joe Biden should stay on the ticket. Now, let me just ask you something. if he just had one bad debate night and everything's fine, and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and the entire power structure of the most influential elected Democrats in this country are all on board saying that Joe is great, he should stay on the ticket, we support Joe, then why on earth would you have to gather your family for an emergency meeting at Camp David to discuss your future? It makes no sense, does it? It only makes sense if you're watching a drama play out, if you're watching a scripted event meant to manipulate you. You see, of course, everybody with any power or influence are going to go on the record and say that they want Joe Biden to stay. And the leaks coming out of this family meeting told us that Hunter Biden was one of the top advocates to keep Joe in office because, you got to get a pardon for whatever might happen in the future. Oh, he can already have his pardon for his past crimes, but what about the stuff he's planning on doing? So Hunter Biden and the whole Biden family is on board with him staying in office. And most importantly, Jill Biden, the first lady, she was the most vocal saying, we got to stick with this. I'm all in. We're all in. Joe, you got to stay on the ticket. So, of course, obviously, Joe's going to stay, right? No, Joe's going to step aside. But the drama has been scripted and it's playing out for you right now. You see, what makes Joe Biden look the best? If Barack Obama and Bill Clinton push him out by saying, yeah, we got to go another direction, that makes Joe Biden look bad. If his son or his wife say, Joe, let's hang it up, let's go home. Now, that makes Joe Biden look weak. It makes him look bad. No, the only scenario where Joe Biden continues the facade that he's a great man, and he is not a great man. He is a very small man, a small, mean-spirited, inconsequential man. But the only drama, the only script, the only scenario that can be created where Joe Biden suddenly looks like a big man is if, against all the advice and all the support and all the encouragement of everyone, from party apparatchiks to past presidents to his own wife, despite all of their support and encouragement, Joe Biden stood up and said, no, for the good of this country, for the good of our party, for the American people, and for the United States of America and the Constitution, I will step aside. Because the most important thing is that we protect our democracy and we stop the bad orange fascists from winning in November. And even though everybody encouraged me to stay and no one's pushing me out, I am setting my personal political ambition aside and I'm going to make the patriotic move, as only a true patriot who loves this country can do. Pay no attention to the Swiss bank accounts that have millions of dollars in cash that's been wrestled away from donors to keep me happy and quiet for the rest of my life and to keep my family supported for the rest of their lives. Pay no attention to that. That had nothing to do with this. And pay no attention to the senatorial seat that's going to open up for my wife, Jill. She runs next election cycle. Pay no attention. And pay no attention to the multiple pardons that have been guaranteed for me, my brother, and my son, not just now, but in the future. That has nothing to do with this. Nope, I'm doing the noble thing, the selfless thing. I'm going to step down. I think that's what's happening right now. Because Democrats care about one thing, and that's power. And right now in this country, for now, the only way you get and keep power is by winning elections. Even if you come close and then you can, cheat to make sure that the numbers come your way, you still got to get that election night victory. And right now, Joe Biden is a loser. Joe Biden will not win, and it's not going to get any better. He's not going to get any better. And they figured it out. This whole reason why we had an early debate was so they had room to maneuver if just this sort of thing happened. And this did happen, and now they're maneuvering. Let the maneuvering begin. Which brings us back to Tucker Carlson. So here's Tucker Carlson with his reporting that he shared on X. From an unusually good source, Obama's tweet supporting Joe Biden was disingenuous. In private, Obama is telling people Biden can't win, and he is therefore in favor of an open convention. Obama will not say whom he supports, nor, as of yesterday afternoon, had he met personally with Biden to deliver the message. Relations between the Obamas and the Bidens have never been warm. At times, they've been hostile, but recently, they've deteriorated further, mostly due to Jill Biden. In the hours and days after the debate, she kept her husband cloistered away from anyone who might convince him to drop out. Jill Biden is the driving force behind her husband's re-election campaign, just as she was in 2020, when other members of the family, including Biden's sister Val, considered him too impaired to run. The next generation of potential Democratic candidates understands all this as an opportunity, and they're circling, particularly Gretchen Whitmer, who is promoting herself aggressively. That's Tucker Carlson's reporting on what's going on behind the scenes. Meanwhile, James Clyburn on MSNBC, he continues to toe the party line here and put the face on for the public. But this isn't what's going on behind the scenes, of course. James Clyburn, I'll remind you, was critical in Joe Biden getting the nomination. He colluded with Barack Obama after the South Carolina primary to make sure that Biden won there and became the nominee. You'll remember that Bernie Sanders was lined up to be the nominee, and he would have lost to Donald Trump because as far gone as our country is, we're not going to elect a socialist, not an open socialist. So here's James Clyburn.
President afterwards. Congressman Clyburn, since you are there in Wisconsin and doing lots of events, tell me the truth. What are you hearing from people on the ground?
Almost total. And I'm saying almost because I have not heard a single person express anything negative. All they're saying to us is keep Joe Biden moving forward. And from what I've heard, around $33 million in small donations, most of it, two-thirds of it coming in small donation, coming into the party. When I left Washington on Friday night, I went directly to Tampa, Florida. I was in a meeting with 8,400 African-American men, to a person, every one of them. When I mentioned Joe Biden, they were standing on their feet. They had nothing to say but positive things about this campaign. So when I hear all this talk about he should drop out, I don't see that anywhere out here. No place. Here in Madison, I'm not in Benoit. I'm going on to Milwaukee. Nothing.
Yeah. Does anyone believe that? Does anybody at all believe that? I've been out there. I'm at 8,431. That's an oddly specific number, by the way. Not one person had any hesitation about Joe Biden. Does anyone? Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. I doubt that was the case at Camp David within the Biden family. It's impossible. And yet Clyburn's the guy that tried out. And then the other octogenarian, Nancy Pelosi. This is great. Because apparently she's supposed to make Joe Biden look spry and absolutely together. Compared to Nancy Pelosi right now, Joe Biden looks like the president of the local Mensa chapter.
My people are very much Biden, Kamala Harris. And this is an opportunity for Joe Biden to go out there and show he has the stamina and the rest. And by the way, while the press, and for some reason they don't, there are healthcare professionals who think that Trump has dementia, that his thoughts do not go together.
I do like it. That was a morning show, right? How many Bloody Marys were involved in the show prep for State of the Union this Sunday? 6:48 in the morning in San Francisco. I'm sorry, what was the last part there that she wanted to say?
Is that Trump has dementia, that his thoughts do not go together.
Boy, you talk about glass houses. So Nancy's out there not saying, the real problem here is Trump and his dementia. Okay. But it sure looks like Jill Biden is the person that a lot of people, even openly, are saying is at fault here. That Jill Biden is the one who personally, for her own selfish reasons, wants to stay in power, wants to stay in the White House. And she's the one who's keeping people from seeing Joe from witnessing how bad it is. She's the one who's actually pushing him out front to make him run again because of her own personal ambition. Now, you may think that that's all, Lady Macbeth, sexism, Madame Mao, Nurse Ratched kind of stuff, but I don't know, maybe it's me. But when all of this is going on in the public sphere and then Vogue comes out with that cover with Jill Biden, she looks different. What's different about her? I don't think. First Lady Jill Biden, we will decide our future is the cover. I don't know if that does anything to dissuade anyone's belief that maybe Jill is doing an Edith Wilson turn here. You know who Edith Wilson was? She was the first lady when Woodrow Wilson was president. That was another Democrat racist who loved the Ku Klux Klan. Woodrow Wilson, look it up. He had a stroke while in office, and unbeknownst to anyone apparently in the federal government or in the country, he was completely debilitated. And Edith Wilson, the wife of the president, carried out his official duties for the rest of his presidency. Sound familiar? Here's how the article begins. Following the presidential debate on June 27th, Dr. Jill Biden, the First Lady and Vogue's cover subject this month, has fiercely defended her husband and stood by him, and as she's always done. Reached by phone on June 30th at Camp David, where the Biden family had gathered for the weekend, she told Vogue that they, quote, will not let those 90 minutes define the 4 years he's been president. We will continue to fight, unquote. We will continue to fight. But I wonder, why didn't Joe Biden make that statement? I wonder what it would have sounded like if Joe Biden had made that statement. She added, President Biden will always do what's best for the country. Whatever happens in the weeks and months between now and November, it is Dr. Biden who will remain the president's closest confidant and advocate. In Vogue's August issue, the First Lady talks to Maya Singer about the most pressing issues in this election, the economy, reproductive rights, and the state of democracy itself. We will decide our future, she says, of women voters, perhaps the most critical constituency this fall. All right. Our own Katie Pavlich from Town Hall pulled a couple of quotes from this magazine that should chill you to the bone if you worry about people getting close to the presidency and getting drunk with power. Listen to this. If you want to know what power feels like, try to get yourself driven around in a motorcade. Flashing police chaperone lights form a perimeter as you blaze down an empty highway, waiting. Cars backed up on entry ramps as you pass. It's as if the world is holding its breath for you. Also, rules don't apply. At 9 Mile, an entourage of 30 or so are noisily hustling to follow a trim blonde woman in a pristine white suit as she strides nonchalantly past clanging, gurgling, brewing vats, aiming for a back office. This is my first glimpse of First Lady Dr. Jill Biden exiting the sealed chamber of power into the middle of America, a vision of calm amid utter cacophony. I don't know, maybe when you assign a journalist to cover the First Lady or anybody close to the presidency, maybe you shouldn't select someone who would actually be intoxicated by the exertion of power, executive power, over we peons in the middle of the country. That's gross. That's like authoritarian fascist pornography. And that's the Vogue write-up of Jill Biden. Scared yet? Meanwhile, over at Time magazine, they had a very different kind of cover, a little bit more reflective of what's really going on. But here's what I don't understand. Time magazine has this cover, but James Clyburn has been traveling all around the country for the last week, and he hasn't heard one person express one doubt about Joe. Weird, isn't it? I can't connect those dots. Maybe you can. New York Times. Biden's family tells him to keep fighting as they huddle at Camp David. President Biden is trying to figure out how to tamp down Democratic anxiety after last week's disastrous debate performance. This headline, quite properly described by this very funny person on Twitter as Berlin 1945. You've seen the video from that movie about Hitler where he's in the bunker and he's going insane and screaming at everybody? That's where we are right now. Right before he sticks the gun in his mouth, Biden's family tells him to keep fighting as they huddle at Camp David. Back to Gretchen Whitmer, by the way, in this article. There's a lot of articles right now because a lot of people are leaking what's going on behind the scenes because this is palace intrigue stuff. And I know you're all thinking, oh, but Democrats, they're always lockstep and they're always shoulder to shoulder and they're so disciplined and they always fall in line. Yeah, that's until blood is in the water. The second blood is in the water, they want that power. Whitmer, recognizing as much, disavowed the draft Gretch chatter. She used the call to reiterate her commitment and willingness to help the president, but also voiced her concern about how much more difficult the campaign would be now for Biden, I'm told by a person familiar with the call. So I love that. I don't want anyone thinking that they should draft me for president. I'm happy to be governor of Michigan and ruin the lives of Michiganders in the upper and lower peninsula. I'm here for Joe Biden. I will say, though, I mean, those of us who support Joe Biden, and don't get me wrong, I support Joe Biden, but those of us who do, our job just got a lot harder after the debate. It's going to be a lot more difficult to campaign for him, but I'm willing to do it. I don't have a second of doubt, but it's going to be a toughie. So transparent. Even more revealing is how word of the call reached me, this person writing the article, from someone close to a potential 2028 Whitmer rival from the Democratic presidential nomination. This person said Whitmer had phoned O'Malley Dillon with more of an unambiguous SOS to relay that Michigan, in the wake of the debate, was no longer winnable for Biden. So Whitmer says, nobody tried to draft me. I don't want to run for president. I'm behind Joe Biden. But behind the scenes, she's calling all the people in the party saying, well, you've lost Michigan. It's over. I don't know how you get Michigan back. Oh, well, actually, I do have one idea of how you could get Michigan back. It's Gretchen Whitmer. God help us all. Meanwhile, of course, as all of this chatter erupts around us and we wait with bated breath to see the mashed potato brains president emerge from Camp David, all eyes are on the succession. If, in fact, Joe Biden does step down, as it appears he will he step down from the presidency or just from the campaign? One could be hard-pressed to make the argument that he's incapable of running for president, but he is capable of being president. But they might end up splitting the baby in Solomon-esque fashion, allowing him to stay in the White House through the end of his term, but then replacing him on the ticket. And then, of course, all bets are off. Although one assumes that if Kamala Harris was selected to be the vice president and therefore be the obvious replacement for the president, should, God forbid, he not be able to fulfill his term in office, then if she's good enough to be the vice president now, why is she not good enough to be the presidential nominee when they have to pick someone on the ticket? Not to mention the fact that she is the first Black woman president, and it makes no difference to me, but it certainly makes a big difference to Democrats, or at least they claim it makes a big difference to them. They're the party of identity politics. And, it's time for a Black woman to have a chance, I'm told, over and over and over again. Not a competent Black woman, not a qualified Black woman, not a Black woman who doesn't maniacally laugh at things that aren't funny and will actually sound like you're driving a nail into your ear for the next 4 years of your life. No. Just a Black woman in general. Doesn't matter. Let me just speak on behalf of everyone here at Town Hall Media and, frankly, everyone watching this and, in my opinion, probably the vast, vast, vast majority of every single American. We are so screwed until November. Over on MSNBC. Hey, remember Friday, we showed you what appeared to be a squabble, a lover's spat, a marital rift between Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, the morning team on Morning Joe. They were angry at each other. Mika thought that Joe was not supporting Joe Biden enough, not towing the party line enough. Well, this morning, anyone who's still watching that show tuned in to see that Joe was not there. Was Joe in the doghouse? Is he sleeping on the sofa? What's going on with Joe? Well, Mika addressed it and then went on to have what can only be described as a 15-minute meltdown about the Biden presidency. And pay close attention to the expert skill she employs in reading her script on the teleprompter. It's really something to behold. What a pro.
Now, our Joe, is off this morning on a planned vacation. On Friday's show, I should clarify, Joe said it may be time for Biden to consider stepping aside. He also said we should wait a few days to see how he responds. We're shoulder to shoulder on that. I do agree. Joe Biden has work to do. He has to do better. His team has to do a lot better. I'm just not ready, though, to count Joe Biden out, not even close. Just as Joe and I were stunned by the president's poor performance on the debate stage, we've also been surprised by the level of animosity toward Donald Trump from people who once supported him. The debate acted as a wake-up call that was a loss for Joe Biden, no question, but not a win for Trump. The choice is one terribly bad night versus a decade of destruction to our core beliefs, our democratic values, and yes, our Constitution. Someone who stumbled over his words for 90 minutes versus someone who lied to the American people over and over again. A man slowed down by a cold versus a man with a cold, vile, and merciless heart. I think in the days and weeks ahead, as we move away from this debate, clarity will hopefully set in. For me, Joe Biden is still the man for this moment.
Wow, where to begin? There's more, and it's exquisite. If you like to see liberals losing their minds, you're going to want to stick with this because there's more from Mika. But I'd be remiss if I didn't push back just a little bit and point out some facts. What did she say? A man who stumbled over his words. Is that what Joe Biden was doing? Stumbling over his words? His brain malfunctioned for 90 straight minutes. What's left of his brain? One wonders if Robert Kennedy Jr.'s worm hopped from ear to ear and has been devouring whatever is left of the mashed potato brains Joe Biden has. A man who stumbled over his words versus a man who lied to the American people over and over. That's the big narrative coming out of the debate. Oh, sure, Joe Biden had an off night, but Donald Trump lied. Donald Trump lied. Donald Trump lied. And I don't know who started it, whether the media started it and Joe Biden and the Democrats picked it up, or Joe Biden and the Democrats started it and the media picked it up. It doesn't matter. It's all a revolving door right now. It's what my old friend and mentor, Andrew Breitbart, would call the Democrat media complex. Who knows where the lies and narrative and talking points begin, but they all repeat it to each other. Biden had a tough night, but Trump lied. Trump lied. Trump lied. Well, for just 49 seconds on CNN, we had a tiny bit of reality, just a little dose of truth from their so-called fact checkers. 49 seconds. But watch it.
He's the only president in a while who didn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world. Troops have, of course, died on his watch. He said he's put in a $15 per shot cap on insulin and Medicare. It's a $35 a month cap. He said it's a $200 cap on overall drug spending in Medicare. It's $2,000 a year. He said the border now has fewer crossings than when Trump was in office. That's generally not true. He said, or at least strongly suggested, unemployment was at 15% when he took office. It was actually 6.4. He said Trump wants to get rid of Social Security. Trump doesn't. He said billionaires pay 8.2% in taxes. It's much higher. He said Trump told Americans to inject bleach amid COVID. We know Trump made foolish comments about scientists studying disinfectant injection, but didn't frame it as advice to people. And Biden said the Border Patrol endorsed him. No, its union supported the border bill he supported, never endorsed him himself.
Wow. So that's pretty impressive. That's a lot of lies. Trump lied, Trump lied, Trump lied. Look at that. And that's from CNN. Okay. There was actually more. because he also repeated the very fine people on both sides lie that just got fact-checked by Snopes a week ago. There were a lot of lies from Biden. And also, did you notice he sounded like Ben Shapiro on amphetamines? Do you notice how fast they wanted to go through all of those? In just 49 seconds, that was something like 12 or 15 lies from Joe Biden in the debate, and it wasn't even all of them. If it were Donald Trump, they would have spent 10 minutes, one segment each on each one of those lies. It would have been a 2-hour special. But instead, he's like, so no, Mika, I'm sorry. This wasn't a comparison between one man who stumbles over his words versus a man who lied and lied and lied. Okay. I won't concede the idea that Donald Trump lied. I think all politicians exaggerate. But what you just saw, I'm sorry, there's only one lie I care about from Joe Biden. When he stood on that stage and said that he's the only president who hasn't lost any member of the military on his watch. That is the most, that could be the only lie, and it's disqualifying. The most despicable, disgusting lie. Imagine being a parent of someone who died in Afghanistan, seeing that man say that. What else did Mika say? Oh, yes, that a man had a bad night because he was debilitated by a cold, a horrible cold. I keep hearing this, that Joe Biden had a bad cold. This is a lie that they floated out there 45 minutes into the debate. Oh, he's affected by this cold. He's got a cold, a terrible cold. Did y'all see what Joe Biden did right after the debate? Like an hour after the debate, he and Jill visited a Waffle House in the greater Atlanta area. Here's Joe Biden with a cold going to a Waffle House.
How you doing, sir? How you doing? You know, you spend too much time in the gym, I think. Hey, man, how you doing? Good to see you.
Hey, you welcome. You have our support.
God, love you, thank you, guys.
So Joe Biden has a debilitating cold. It's so bad that he can barely speak on the stage, and it's affecting his mental abilities because he's sick. The virus, it's a bad virus. It's the cold. And an hour after the debate, he goes into a Waffle House, a restaurant, where he's shaking hands with people. He's reaching over the food service to grab a cup of coffee. He's leaning into a woman, smelling her hair, of course, and breathing right into her mouth, spittle flying everywhere where people are trying to eat. So either Joe Biden is just fine infecting everyone in a Waffle House so that he can use them for political props in a propaganda video, or, hear me out, they were lying and he didn't have a cold. Oh, and one other thing. A cold? He had a cold. Well, tell me something, Mika. Does a cold do this to a man? But that is a hell of a cold. That is the Mount Vesuvius of colds. That's the freaking Titanic of colds. If a cold does this to him, that, you know, a dosage of NyQuil is not going to fix this cold. A cold. And people watch this stuff on MSNBC and they believe it. All right, let's get back to Mika and her complete and total mental breakdown.
So now, after Thursday's abysmal debate performance, President Biden finds himself at rock bottom again. It was bad. And again, a chorus of Biden doubters. My family and I, as you know, have known this man for decades, and his family as well. And yes, I know them personally. And I still believe in Joe Biden. I've learned that counting him out is always a mistake. And doing that now could be catastrophic for our country.
We're going to jump in a second, but it's funny that nobody at MSNBC, last I checked, a news organization, actually stepped in and said, you know, Mika, the fact that your family has known his family for decades, like since you were a little girl, actually makes you the wrong person to deliver these remarks. It actually doesn't help matters. It actually might send a message to some of our viewers that you're not being genuine or factual or honest, that you're actually letting your emotions and your allegiance to him on a personal level color your analysis and objectivity. Maybe you should sit this one out. And yet nobody at NBC News bothered to think that through. They said, oh, this is terrific. This is powerful stuff. And I also want to point out, and I'll let it play for a while now, I want to point out, as I already mentioned, how bad she is. It's just horrible. She cannot read a teleprompter. It's her job. It's all she's had to do for years, for decades, is sit there and be pretty for her husband and read a teleprompter. And now when it's just her on screen and she's got this monologue to read, it's so halting, it's so awkward that it actually adds to the level of Soviet-style propaganda you are witnessing. It's just bad.
Do there need to be changes? Yes. Managing him, management to his schedule, changes maybe even to those around him. I'll also say America needs an explanation from Joe Biden and reassurance that the other night was a one-time event and not part of a larger problem. I don't think it's over. This moment in the race fits the entire narrative of Joe Biden's life. In his personal and professional life, Biden has repeatedly risen up from rock bottom. It's what we love about him. So many draw hope from his empathy and his ability to have perspective, even right now, and to persevere when he is completely counted out. His list of losses and failures is long and would be unbearable for most. In 1972, his wife and baby daughter were killed in a car accident. He had been elected to the Senate and took the oath of office in his surviving son's hospital room to remain by their bedsides. In 1987, his first campaign for president came to an end, and so nearly did his life when a few months later, he suffered a brain aneurysm. It was so severe that his doctor told him his chance of survival was less than half, just to survive the surgery. And even if he lived, a long list of physical and mental limitations were likely. At his bedside before the surgery, he told his sons he was proud of them. And then,
I just want to point out here, he actually had 2 brain surgeries. And what was that warning? That he would have a lifetime of mental issues because of it? Okay, Mika, you're sort of making the case here as to what's wrong and why he needs to go, because we're witnessing the fallout right now. I thought it was a lifelong stutter, by the way. Yeah. All right. We'll continue with the slideshow from Western Lensman.
Joe Biden survived the surgery, rehabilitated, and didn't look back. In 2008, his second bid for the presidency came to another early, painful end. After a poor showing in Iowa, he finished near the bottom with less than 1% of the vote, his campaign bottoming out after another low blow. And yet, the following summer, Biden would be back on the Democratic ticket as Barack Obama's running mate. 5 years later, a year into his second term as vice president, Joe Biden's son, Beau, was diagnosed with brain cancer, believed to have been caused by exposure to burn pits while his son was serving in Iraq as a captain in the Army National Guard. Beau would die 2 years later. The second child Joe Biden would have to bury. That is the lowest of lows in Joe Biden's life. In 2015, another political failure. Barack Obama chose to support Hillary Clinton as his heir apparent and not even his own vice president. After numerous political and personal setbacks, Joe Biden may have questioned whether he would ever return to presidential politics again. And then came Charlottesville and the vile, racist march by white supremacists and neo-Nazis across the UVA campus. as a direct response to what he saw as a threat to core values. Biden announced his third try for the White House. And just like his first two presidential campaigns, he was staring at an early exit in the race, stumbling in the first Democratic debate after a broadside by Kamala Harris. He finished a distant fourth in Iowa and an even worse fifth in New Hampshire. All experts, just like right now, said it was over for the man from Scranton.
No one has gone this far, finishing fourth and fifth and vastly under expectations. And when you make an argument that you're the most electable Democrat in the field and you can't back that up, that's a serious problem.
There's tremendous amount of goodwill for the former vice president. Very, very well liked in the Democratic Party, but you have to give a reason why you're running.
Yeah, Biden's plummet has been really something to watch.
It was quite an awkward interview on the set of Morning Joe in New Hampshire. Awkward for everyone on the set, except Joe Biden. As his political obituary was being written, Biden was joyful and ready to keep fighting.
I still feel good. This is any Democratic candidate who's beaten an incumbent has been someone who so far has been able to get a significant support from the African American community.
All right. That's it went on and on, but you saw the Soviet level propaganda hagiography of Joe Biden and the narrative that's being built there for the core MSNBC audience, the Joe and Mika crowd, the bitter clingers, the ones who are going to, emerge from the cave in Okinawa 20 years after World War II is over and still keep fighting for dear leader. Or they're just part of the distraction and the narrative that's being created right now, where everyone wants Joe Biden to stay in. He's our only hope. Please, Joe, stay. And then Joe will emerge as the selfless sacrifice for our nation, as the brave patriot who has been through so much. And now he will set his own personal ambition aside and make way for the new generation, Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom. This is all a show, what they're putting out there for you. And I know you can see right through it. No one believes that Mika Brzezinski is moved to tears over the courage of the great Joe Biden. No one. Because it's all bullshit. That's it for this time. We'll be back next time. And in the meantime, my name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.